Hey everybody, this is Josh Thomas coming to you from the couch today. My special guest is Erikka. Erikka, thanks for jumping in.
Thank you for having me.
And the point of what we're trying to do today is, one of the value statements of Orchard Hill Church is that we're helping people find and follow Jesus because the story of Orchard Hill will be told in the changed lives of others. So Erikka has an amazing story that on the weekend we only got to hear like a short little 3-minute section, and you are a much bigger person than just that 3 minutes, and your journey of faith and your experience on the planet so far has been huge. So today we hope to kind of jump into that and give you a chance to share more of who you are with the community, so we can continue to love you and know you better, and so that the lobby continues to be a happy place for you to, out to there. So I'm just going to jump right in, and Erikka, give us a snapshot of who Erikka was growing up in the early years.
That's a good question. I was definitely one of those little kids that, loved to be outside, run around, fall down on my bike. Me and my brother were only 18 months apart, so we spent a lot of time together outside and with the neighbor kids in the yard and things like that. I liked to get messy, play around in the dirt, things like that. I would draw a bunch and different things like that. Like at school, I did like art when I was growing up. Okay. I did stop for quite a few years in the middle, but, I enjoyed those things. I had good memories with my parents for sure. I have one younger brother, 3 older brothers. So being the only girl is kind of one of those things that you love and you hate it for sure. I don't know. I was definitely a creative kid. I think I was a little weird, but there was only boys around me. I didn't really know how I was supposed to act really, other than.
And you grew up in sort of in the area here?
No, I'm from a small town in. They claim it's central Pennsylvania, but it's definitely not in the middle of the state.
Okay.
But growing up, the radio would say, "Good morning, Central America," or Central Pennsylvania, but it's called Coalport, super small. I grew up in Glasgow, which was a couple towns over.
Okay.
But, it's very small. Out here is definitely a lot different than where I'm from, but I wanted to pursue art, so I had to move somewhere that had more people and more businesses and more opportunity. So that's how I ended up out here, so
nice.
Much different, yeah.
It makes some total sense. I can see why when you have a lot of place to play out in the world and you get to experience that, and if you're the only girl and you have, I'm assuming, rambunctious brothers, and mom and dad are like, go outside and play.
Exactly.
And that happens a lot.
Yeah, we were only really allowed to play inside if it was freezing outside or raining. So, and even sometimes when it rained, we still went outside anyway.
Like, sure, we've got a game we can play out there.
Exactly.
Super fun. Tell me about, is your family involved in church at all?
My distant family was. My mom talked about God a lot when I was growing up. She was raised Catholic. My dad definitely mentioned God here and there, but we didn't really attend church other than, the Christmas crowd or the Easter crowd. Like, we were kind of one of those families that only really attends for holidays.
Sure.
My grandmother was really involved. She definitely tried to get us in there more than we did, but, there's only so much pull your grandparents have on your parents at that point. So, I would occasionally go with my aunts and uncles, but most of the time we would stick to Easter and Christmas when I was growing up.
Right to there. What give us with that maybe smaller amount of church integration versus maybe where you are today?
Exactly.
What was your concept of kind of who God was, who Jesus was? How was that present ever in growing up?
I think growing up it was one of those things like you hear about a celebrity on TV, you hear about Santa Claus, you hear about all of these big names, but you never really see them or know exactly what they're about. I mean, kids, obviously, they know what the Easter Bunny's about and things like that, but, you don't actually, I don't think it was ever actually really dug into on, actually being here, and it took me a long time to grasp the whole Holy Trinity thing. Like, that really confused that he could be Son, God, and omnipresent with us. Like, that took me a long time to wrap my head around, but exactly. So I think I started coming here at Orchard Hill before I actually started to wait, I understand. So
Yeah.
more or less it was a famous name that you hear about and not necessarily what it actually, like what he actually is. So it was definitely heard of, but not known of, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
That I completely understand what
Yeah.
you're saying there. All right. So that was elementary school, running around out to there. Who was Erikka in high school?
Erikka in high school, I think she wanted to believe she knew what was best about everything all the time. I think that I avoided a lot of things, and honestly, school was an outlet for me, which is a really weird thing to say.
Interesting.
Like, I just love to be out of my house and around kids my own age. I could pretend everything was great. I'd wake up really early in the morning to get ready because I was so excited to go. But then, at the end of the day, you go home and then what you left behind is still there. So I think it was more of a weird outlet for me that I could be around kids my own age and pretend that it all was good. As long as I was like happy and nice to everyone around me, then nobody would assume, you go home at the end of the day and sometimes you turn into a bully whenever you struggle at home, but I really tried not to be that stereotype for sure. And I think that goes into, my parents were very loving, but they did make some mistakes when I was growing up for sure. My dad, he drank for 18 years of my life, and he kept that to a Friday through Sunday kind of cadence. Like Monday through Thursday, he was very strict about what he did. He went to bed early, had to get up early next day for work, super responsible, super loving, great dad. But then on the weekends, turns into somebody else, and I think that was kind of, it definitely wears at you a little bit because you try to develop this idea of who your parents are when you start to be a teenager, and you try to understand them as people, but whenever it's almost two people in one, and then your mom deals with that and then her own issues, and it's just like something that you're kind of just floating through that part of your life and you don't really understand, and then you think you want to figure it out, and then the more you learn, it's like, maybe I don't want to know this, so I'm going to go to school and pretend everything's good. Or, we still played outside whenever we were younger. We definitely still walked around in the woods, like me and my brother. Like, we would definitely still leave and do things outside together. But then as we got older, I learned how to drive before he does. He's my younger brother, so I would always end up leaving. He had a dirt bike. Like, we ended up forming our own identities as we got older. And mine was definitely avoiding what was at home and going to hang out with my friends and do things that were not at home. And there was a lot of instances where as I got older, my dad definitely got worse as I was older, just because it's a long-term effect of an issue he was having. And, he had his own struggles he was dealing with that weren't getting resolved. They were just getting ignored. And typically that breeds, an increase of problems. So as that started to happen, my mom would send me away, and she was just like, I would stay with my friends. And it was one of those things that you're trying to learn how to be growing into an adult then, but whenever you have things piled on that aren't necessarily your own problems, I think that that's where some darkness can breed, unfortunately. And I think that that's what happened to me in early adolescence until I was a young adult. I really didn't believe that anybody deserved to go through those kind of things, and I didn't understand that some things like that can teach you a lot in the future, and I just kind of rejected a lot of the Christian values and denied the existence of God in general. And I think that it was easy to do so, especially when you don't have a lot of friends that grew up in the church to, bring that back to you or remind you. And when you're a teenager and your parents are struggling with things, going to them for those kind of things seems like, well, we can't even get through the week, let alone deal with all these other problems. So you try to deal with them on your own, and sometimes you participate in underage drinking, and I definitely was one of those people that thought that was going to help me, which is now definitely something I would consider a mistake. Given the background I have, it's like, luckily I was able to not let that become a habit and kind of grew out of doing those things that were bad for me at that point. So
Did you feel like you talked earlier about how school was kind of an escape? Did you feel like you had the ability, even though you've seen maybe your parents behave in these different ways, did you feel like you were forming a solid identity, or did you feel like oh, I'm this at home, oh, I'm
Yeah.
this at school, oh, I'm this with this group of friends. Like, how does that development, how did that go for you?
I definitely would not say that I had a solid identity forming at that point. Fluid would seem to be the better term for that. I think that I tried to compartmentalize a lot of things that were going on at home and pretending like, no, that doesn't happen to me. Like, that wouldn't happen to me. I'm normal. Like, I'm at school, like, I have all my homework done, my grades are good.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not going on at home. So it was like, I developed this front to my friends and my peers, and then there was my parents at home who knew like the full circle of the situation, and then there was also my extended family, which knew what was going on, but not what was going on, essentially. Like, they hear about it, but they don't actually experience it. So I think that the only person that really could have understood me fully in that situation is my younger brother, because my 3 older brothers are just like my dad's stepkids. Like, they're not really his children. They were kind of a lot older than us, and they were already
Doing their own thing.
getting out of the house and developing. They already had an identity formed at the point where they met him. So I think my little brother kind of could probably resonate a little bit more than most other people with me on that. And yeah, I think that I pretended a lot and didn't want people to assume that things were going wrong. And then eventually when you graduate high school and your house burns down, then everybody's like, oh, so that's an issue. Like, that really was a problem for you. But
All right, if you could take us
Yeah.
through that event, what that was
Yeah.
it a night? Was it a day? Where were family members?
yeah, so I think it was, I don't know, mid-August maybe. I like was done with high school. It was actually 7 days before I left for college. Like, I was packed and ready to leave my life behind. I was like, I'm gonna go find myself and start over, kind of thing. You know, like the angsty storyline of most coming of age movies. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And I was ready to go, and unfortunately a friend of mine, his dad passed away like that week or something. So I was going to his funeral that day, and, you know, of course it was going to be sad. It was one of my close friends' dads dying. He was a great guy, like, still think about him occasionally. Like, he was a good man. And, you know, I was just getting ready that day, and I had all this stuff like in my trunk of my car, and I was like, oh, I need to unload that. And I was like, no, I'm gonna wait, like my laptop, my book bag, like random things. And I was like, no, I'll do that when I get home tonight, you know, all this stuff. And just started thinking. And then I go, and, you know, the funeral persists. We want to hang out with him. His name is Cody. Like, we wanted to be with Cody and his family and like be the friends that he needed us to be that day, because of course that would be a tough day. So we did that, and we spent most of the day with him. Where I grew up, there was terrible cell phone service. Like, you could not get a text message anywhere except for a few random places throughout the, you know, general school district area. So it's like nighttime by this point, and we go to one of my friends. Her name was Nikki. We went to her house, and then all of a sudden my phone's just like blowing up, and people have called me, people have texted me. None of my family did. So I was like, oh, like, am I all of a sudden popular? Like, did somebody post something embarrassing of me on the internet? And then, like, a lot of them start coming through, and they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Like, Erikka, where are you? And I was like, why would they want to know if I'm okay? So, like, I picked the first one up top, and I'm like, yeah, I'm okay? Question mark. Like, why are you asking me that? She's like, I heard your house burned down. And I was like, sorry, what? So I, like, try to call my house, and I'm, like, calling and calling. Phone is just no answering machine, nothing. So I was like, one of my friends there was with me. We were waiting for other friends, and I was like, Braden, you got to take me home, I think. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm like really starting to freak out.
Yeah.
So we get in his car, and we start, like, it's like 2 towns over. So we're driving through, and the road's closed to get to my house. Fire trucks. I was like, oh, like,
This is real now.
like, oh,
Yeah.
like, you want to swear really bad because you're like, what's going on? So we take a different route to get to one of the back roads, because there's like a few different routes into the same place. Like, it's a small town with a bunch of weaving roads. And we get to this next one. We're almost there. We're like maybe a mile away, and it's closed again. And I was like, okay, so I either get out of this car and run to my house, or I have to go around again, which takes another 15, 20 minutes to do it, because it's all pretty spread out. And
at this point, you haven't had contact with family members.
None of my family members picked up. Like, I don't think any of them had their phones. Obviously, like, they were probably inside. But,
Sure.
you know, I couldn't get a hold of anyone, and also driving through, you don't have service anywhere, so it's like I could have tried to keep texting them, but nothing would have went through, like,
Okay.
so I'm just sitting in the passenger seat, dead silent in the car. My friend was very good about, like, not trying to be like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Like,
Yeah.
he didn't, like, try to stress me out or do anything.
Or even, oh, it's going to be okay. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
like,
okay.
it was just dead silent.
oh,
He
no.
let me sit there. It was just, like, heavy breathing and, like, hearing the car engine, because, like,
Yeah.
you know, you're 16, you usually get a relatively not great car just in
Right.
case, you know, so you can hear the car and nothing else. And I just, like, my mind was racing, and we had to take a 20-minute detour to get around, and it was still blocked. So
Yeah.
he stops the car. He's like, Erikka, what do we do? And I just, like, opened the car door. I had flip-flops on. I, like, just started running down the road, got there barefoot because I just, flip-flops couldn't
going.
hang with
Yeah.
me, I guess. And, you know, I get there, and there's just, it felt like there was 100 fire trucks there. And I was just like, okay, I can't see anything. Like, I'm still, like, kind of far from where my house would have been. And a couple of my friends from high school volunteered on the fire department, and they were the first two people that I could actually, like, clarify who they were. There was, like, unfortunately people around staring and
Sure.
things like
Right,
that.
right.
Like, nothing happens in a small town, so
Right.
when something happens,
This is
you
a
know.
spectacle.
Yeah, so I just approached them. It was, I think Justin and Ian were their names. You know, I got there, and Justin just grabs me. He's like, Erikka, no. And I was like, what? And he's like, you do not want to go. Like, you can't go over there. He's like, there's no reason to go over there. It's gone. I was like, what do you mean gone? He's like, gone. I was like, where's my family? I was like, what do you mean? And I guess the first family member I saw was my one of my older brothers.
Okay.
And he's just like, Erikka, it was your dad. It was his fault, all this stuff. And, like, that's the first thing I heard, and I didn't even see anything from that. And I was just like, okay. And, like, it was, like, one of those things that you just kind of feel your body give way a little bit. And luckily my friend Justin still had me by the arms to where it was like, he was, like, supporting me. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no. And then I kind of just was able to weave through the fire trucks. I was like, I lived here. Like, is my family down there? And they let me down through. And no, actually, after I saw my brother, I said, well, where's my dad? Like, where is he?
Yeah,
'Cause
did
there was
your brother have more information?
yeah,
on
like,
it?
there was
Okay.
some police cars around. Like,
Sure.
of course, like, there's minors there. There's all sorts of things, you know, moving parts. And he was just like, they're taking him to jail. Like, they were like, he's going to prison, XYZ. And then there was a food bank across the street. Like, we lived next to a church, and a food bank was across the street. So
Okay.
he, like, pointed in that general direction of where the food bank was. And I just, like, turned my head and saw my dad. And he, you know, of course saw me at that point. And he just, like,
Sure.
you can just see that he was different, and he was broken and pretty, you know, distraught from the whole situation.
Sure.
And he,
This is a real trauma.
yeah, and he was all bandaged up. He was burned. He went back inside a couple different times to help get my grandma out, the pets, all this stuff, like anything he could think of. He went back in for. Like, he knew as soon as it caught that it went up, and he was able to come over to me, and we were able to, you know, talk. And he's like, he was just broken. And he said he was so sorry. He's like, I will never again. He's like, this will never happen again. He's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, I didn't know it was going to go that way. I didn't know it was going to go that way. And he was just filled with remorse. And
Do you believe him at this point in time?
yeah, I was just like,
This is sincere.
it was one of those things that even his appearance was different. And it was just,
Okay.
he looked older, not like immediately an old man,
Sure,
but
sure,
he
sure.
definitely, like, appeared older and, like, aware of something that he did wrong. He was still, like, drunk,
Sure.
but you could tell that it was not like it
Shock.
usually was. Like, he was in shock for sure. And after that, they kind of just put him in the police car and left with him. And then I turned and I said, where is the rest of my family?
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that I was able to go down through the fire trucks. I saw my mom, and my brother was gone. My younger brother was gone by that point. My grandma was gone. Like, they found places for them to go in the meantime. Because by the time I got there, the house was gone. It was smoke.
Sure.
There was no active fire. Like, I got there probably like an hour after everything
Hours
was
later type
over.
of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just, you know, I could only really talk to my mom, and she was like, Erikka, this is it. She's like, I can't stay married to your dad. She's like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And it was one of those things that was super hard to get through. There was a lot of investigative things that went on, just trying to see if my dad purposely burned down our home for insurance purposes, you know, because that's what they have to do. And thankfully he was found, like, people at work vouched for him. My mom was able to, you know, say her piece and that type of thing. He was found, you know, not guilty of those things just because he was not in his right mind and acquitted of those charges. And I would never say that that was not true, you know, because like I said, he was two different men when I was growing up, and people at work felt that way and could plead to his responsibility. So
a good record there.
Yeah.
Who is the real person?
Exactly. And it was one of those things that the cars outside were melted. Everything was like, it was such a hot fire. It burned for like a week after that inside kind of thing. Yeah. But as time went on, you know, I was able to still go to college. People in my community came together and provided me clothes, materials, books, backpacks, like all of this stuff. Like it was.
And where did you go? How far away from home?
2 hours. I went to Slippery Rock.
Okay, gotcha.
So
Okay.
It was one of those moments where you rag on coming from a small town your whole life, and then you see the great side of coming from a small town is everyone knows who you are, and in times of struggle, they will come together and help you. So, you know, I was grateful for that. But then with everything that went on police-wise, my dad wasn't allowed to see anyone in my family because my brother was a minor. Okay. My mom, obviously, like, they had to keep husband and wife separated just because she could easily, you know, be biased in that situation. So he moved in with his mom. My mom moved in with my grandma's sister.
Okay.
And then my brother went with one of his friends. So everybody was
blasted apart.
I was at college.
Yeah.
My dad was all alone. He had a lot of time to reflect on those things. And whenever I did come home from college, I wanted to see him, and I did go see him, and he just, you know, it was. Did
you have like a family dinner type of it? Let's all go back, or how did that play out over time?
Not necessarily. I was able to see my dad for a little while the investigation still went on. I think it took like a month or two to actually resolve itself. And my parents met like with their lawyer or something like that, like to go over. I don't really know what the final thing was for them, but it was just my parents, my grandmother. And, you know, my mom tells me that the minute she saw my dad, she's like, I melted, Erikka. She's like, he looked like a different guy. Like, she's like, I couldn't leave him, even though I felt like I was at my breaking point at one instant. She said the time that they spent apart helped her reevaluate. And she's like, and during the meeting, I just reached over and grabbed his hand, and we've been fine since then. I'm like, okay, that's like really touching. I'm happy that your marriage worked out. And, you know, it's one of those things that he was eventually able to see my brother, and they have had their time to make amends on those types of things. Yeah. And it was definitely a long period of time before it was like, okay, like there was some presence from above working in our lives at that point, for at least for me to come to. My dad immediately that night was kind of just like, I came to God in a jail cell that night kind of thing. And it was just, you know, you can't really explain anything like that in like earthly terms. So it did take me a while to actually accept that on my own front. I think that after that happened and my dad kind of was able to express those things to me and openly, he's been very proud and loud about what God has done for him, and he has never shied away from the conversation of like, I did things wrong, like I
shouldn't talk about this. This is
it was never a hush hush
type
kind
of a thing.
He's like, Erikka, if this was in Old Testament times, I would have been stoned to death for the things that I did wrong. Sure. He's like, but it's because of Jesus that I'm able to, you know, still be here, still be your dad, still do the things that I love, still get on my boat sometimes, you know, like he is very grateful for everything that happened, and the forgiveness of my family, of course, too, as well as the forgiveness of the Lord, because one's like, you know, the person who gave him all of these opportunities, and the rest is like the family he's been given on earth. So, you know, he's very open and grateful for those things. And a couple years ago, he even helped me to stop like trying to hide it on my own too, because I think I just carried those teenage tendencies to hide who I was. Yeah. And he said, you don't have to be ashamed of it. He's like, you should be proud of your past and things that happened because it was given to you for a reason. Yeah. And I think that's something that, you know, really helped me complete the picture for myself, I guess, and actually
when you were
accept those things.
When you were kind of going through that healing process and the unknown process and all of there, would you say, looking back on it, reflecting now, would you say you were even able to like identify what feelings you were having at that time, or were these even like, oh my gosh, this is I have no idea what's going on. One day it's one thing, one day it's the next. How did you live through that? Explain that a little bit.
I think it was really tough at first. I think that now I'm able to look back and be like, oh, this is what was happening then, and this is what was happening then, and then this is what's happening now. But I think that, when I was 18, I kind of just went to college and compartmentalized, even though like I was grateful for my dad healing through those things. My family came back together. There was a lot more to be grateful for at that point. And I think that somehow I was grateful, but also numb at the same time. I think that I was really just kind of like walking through life in slow motion. And it was one of those things that I had to be in school and I had to now decide what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And it was one of those things that I prepared to go to school to do special education. Okay. And then quickly was just kind of, no, I don't think that's my path. Like, this doesn't feel right. I'm worried about this, this, and this. And then speaking to my dad, he said, Erikka, if you're that worried about it, it's probably not what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. So then, I tossed around the idea of what I was supposed to do. And, I thought about art therapy. But the psych department at Slippery Rock, if anyone from Slippery Rock is watching this, clear that up, please. Yeah. The wait list for that was like going to delay my graduation by at least a year. And I was just like, I don't know if I really want to do that. So then I just stuck with art and I was like, I'll figure it out later. Yeah. But then, one thing led to another and I found this amazing painting professor there. Her name is Heather. And I was like, no, I can't be a painter. There's only a painting emoji. Like, that's so cliche. Ew. Like you're a teenager at that point. But she looked at me one day after my first painting class. She's like, Erikka, I think you're a painter. And I was like,
what are you talking about?
No, I can't be. And I think that, I spent a lot of time being numb up until that point because then it was like, yes, somebody else did identify that for me, but then it almost was like, wait, I think I have a purpose. Yeah. And it was... Would
you say you almost allowed yourself to have that as part of your identity because somebody else said, hey, I'm verifying this in you. You're like...
Like, I needed some validation for that first. Yeah. And which I think, it just plays into the part that I was a little damaged from things that have happened. Certainly. And I was depressed, but then all of a sudden something comes in that I kind of like, but I was like, I'm not very good at this. I can't be a painter. And then she's just like, Erikka, I see it in you. You can do it. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay. So then I would spend hours in my studio. I made 500 paintings for my senior show that like from that degree. And it was just something that just kind of like blew out of me kind of thing. Like it was just, and I think that that's kind of what helped me regain some footing, I guess, instead of just floating my way through what I was doing. And then, at that point, you're graduating college and I was probably like 21, 22-ish. And I looked at my dad and I was like, I think I want you to get me a Bible. I was like, I think it's time for me to have something to reference. And it's like, you go through school, you have books, you always have all this knowledge at your fingertips, but that was never really something that crossed my mind. I think I was still trying to alleviate some of the feelings I was having about something that happened. And I think that for a long time I was like, oh, but my family's better now. I can't be sad about that anymore. And it was just like, you don't want to bring up old feelings about something after the fact, but it's also like if you don't give yourself time to actually heal from it. Yeah. So, I think that that's been quite a journey. Like, I'm 28 now. It's been 10 years almost since that. So there's still some instances where, I'm in counseling and there's times that we're talking and I'm like, oh, so I'm not over that? I was like, I really thought that I was. So I would say it's a lot better now than then, but I think it's always a process and an ongoing journey kind of thing. But
in college, did your art instructor, did they know your history? Did you share that at that point with that instructor of the like, oh, I would have thought they would have been, oh, neat, let's use this in a project or something like that. Did that ever happen? Does that ever?
So I think I was embarrassed for a long time and scared to share that part of me for a really long time. I think that So there's this thing called fiber art where
Okay.
you use like fabrics and papers and different things to like make sculptures essentially.
Okay.
And there was a project that we were supposed to, I don't even remember what the assignment was, but it was like say something about you that nobody else knows or something like that.
Okay.
And I just kind of like sculpted this hand coming out of like smoke, and then the little thing at the bottom I like kind of expressed the night that my house burned down, and all of the faculty does like faculty walkthroughs at the end of the semester or
Yeah.
mid-semester. So it was up then, and I think that was my way of sharing that information with others,
Yeah.
just because I don't think it was, like, it wasn't something that I was going to come out and be like, hello, I'm Erikka, my house burned down, like, that was terrible. Like, it was one of those things that I kept pretty sheltered and close to me. Like, my close friends that I made in school, I did express that to them, and, you know, they were really good at receiving that, and they're still my friends today. So it's like, I really picked and chose who to share that thing with. Yeah. Because I think I was really, like I said, ashamed of it for a long time.
Sure.
And now it's one of those things that I had a first date with my boyfriend, and that's like one of the first things I told him. I was like, I'm really sorry that I said that, but apparently I really needed to tell you. So,
supposed to happen.
yeah, and it's just, you know, I think now it's one of those things that I'm not afraid to share anymore, and I feel like it kind of helps people, like, it's a part of me that I'm not really trying to get rid of or pretend didn't happen anymore. So, but when you're, you know, still growing up and 21 years old, like, until you're 21, you're like, I gotta make friends and like do things and not be like, hey, this horrible thing happened to me this one time.
But you're still, that's part of growing up. It should be. Who am I?
Yeah, exactly.
You have a weird, everyone has a weird sense of like, I think I wanted to be this. I think I am this. I think I'm not. Let me try this. Where is this around? Yeah.
Exactly.
Back to some of your art maybe from that time, do you look back at some pieces that you made and you're like, oh, that's really interesting? Or are you more like, oh, I don't like that anymore? How do you see, knowing what you know, knowing what you were feeling at that time and knowing what other people were feeling and all this, it would be interesting, I would think, to have a physical place and time. I made this because I was feeling this type of thing. Talk us through that as an artist.
So it's interesting to look back, because I think that there are some pieces I had that I would take progress photos of, and I was like now I was like, oh, I actually kind of like that, but I always painted over those things because, like,
interesting,
you know, it just didn't fit what I was trying to do, or somebody told me something they didn't like about it, and I was really trying to conform to this idea of, oh, I need people to like me and I need them to like my work. So there's a little bit of that. All of the early stuff I think is complete garbage. I really didn't like it, but I was still learning.
Sure, right.
So that's its own
You're
section.
Practicing technique at that point,
And then there was a big chunk of work that I went through so many tubes of black. Like, I was really struggling at that point in my life, I think. I was really depressed. I didn't know what to do with all these feelings, and paint made sense.
Right.
So, you know, it was one of those things that I was doing it actively. Obviously, you have, like, all these foundational things where you learn still lifes and to paint people, paint yourself, all this stuff. Like, that was all just fundamental stuff that you have to learn. But the stuff that I was really making from, like, inside my heart was a little bit dark at that point. And it was one of those things that you're surrounded by other people doing the same thing, and a lot of them are going through their own issues. So they're not necessarily like, wow, this is really depressing or whatever. Like, they're just trying to understand you and where you're coming from, and then they critique different elements of, like, the painting itself. But right after I graduated, my parents were there for graduation, obviously, and my dad, he looks at me, he's like, Erikka, why are they all dark? He said, are you depressed? He's like, and for the first time ever, it clicked in my head. I was like, oh no. I was like, maybe
I need to talk to somebody about this.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, like, maybe I am. And then, you know, it's one of those things that you look back on all of that now, and it's like flipping through some of those things, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Right.
I'm like, oh no. Like, even some of the more, like I did a whole show in black and white. It was all landscapes. A lot of that was beautiful work, but like, why did I choose to have no color in something that is predominantly so colorful when we go outside?
Yeah.
And, you know, I chalked it up to, like, oh, I dream in black and white. Like, you know, all this, like, dumb stuff that you try to, like, justify what your work means. But now looking back as an adult, I'm like, I I think my life did lack color at that point, and that was like my only way to actually express that, but I didn't really know what was going on. Like now I'm like, I harp on the fact that hindsight's a beautiful thing, and you start to see it, and then I did go to grad school also for painting as well. I wanted to be a professor, but things don't always go the way you want to. But
you're still young. There's still time.
Yeah. So, and when I get there, I think that I was just kind of, I had all these professors that wanted me to dig in and like be really conceptual, and I like landscapes weren't enough for them kind of thing, and that was really what drove my work up into that point. So I think that there was a lot of work I had there that was like brightly colorful and not really me at all, very abstract, didn't make much sense. And I can understand why they were bullying me so much in my critiques, because I don't see any of that stuff having a ton of value from my first year there. And then things started to change a little bit to where I used more color, and I used a landscape to where I actually think that I started to form myself into those paintings, to where I look back on those now and I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't sell so many of those, because I wouldn't mind having them. But
having a piece of that.
So I think that there's different sections of the work that I've done, and I think that it does play a lot into where I was at that point in my life. And I think that there was still a little bit of that left over in grad school, to where I wasn't fully expressing myself. I more or less was still caring too much about what other people thought. And, you know, even in our young adult groups, we talk about people pleasing and why it's a problem. And looking back on some of those, I'm like, I see why that is a problem, because I was simply painting for other people and not what I was
wanted to express.
Wanted to express, exactly. So it's almost like different periods for other artists. Like we all go through those, and they usually do scream what's going on in your life at that point. So it is interesting to look back at that and think about, you know, how old I was at the time. And
so you've nicely portrayed yourself as growing up as the tough event, as college. Who is Erikka today? Give us a picture of who you are.
Erikka today, I paint murals, so they are a lot different than what I did before, for sure. I got into doing that shortly after graduating. The same painting professor that was like, "You're a painter." She's like, at my senior show, she's like, "Do you have any interest in painting a mural?" I was like, "Heather, I can't paint a mural." She's like, You can paint a mural." I was like,
it's the same thing, only bigger.
I was like, "So where and how big?" She's like, "Grove City Pediatric Office, and there's 5 of them." I said, "Okay." She's like, "Just show up with some sketches and talk to them, and it'll go great." And then I show up with my sketchbook and all these things, and they pick 4 out of 5, and then they're like, "We want a superhero room." I was like, "Great, that sounds really fun." But, you know, after that project, it led to others, and, you know, I took a little hiatus because I got a little nervous about bookkeeping and, you know, the taxes and things. So, you know, I started taking work. I took a full-time job elsewhere at a, you know, local gym, and I really love it there. The community there got me to Orchard Hill. They have opened a lot of doors for me in like community aspects. You know, they've encouraged me to do a lot of things that still speak to who I am. And, you know, there came a conversation a couple weeks, months, I don't know how long ago. And I was like, I think I need to, you know, lean into muraling again. And I think that it was nice to take a break to really get an idea of what I wanted to do. So now I'm actively painting again. And, you know, I prayed and prayed about what I'm supposed to do, like what the right path for me is, and then all of a sudden, all of these projects are laid at my feet, and I was like, okay, well, don't yell at me next time. I hear you.
I can't do all of these.
So, you know, it's one of those things that I think I tried to push it off in a lot of different ways, and, you know, the first thing was like, no, I can't paint, and then it was like, yes, you can. And then there was another instance where I was like, I can only paint in black and white. No, you can paint more. You know, like there was all of these challenges that came with that. But then as I start to, you know, avoid them, they always come back. And then last summer I volunteered at Kids Fest, and there was a wonderful group of ladies who I volunteered with. But it was so bizarre because every one of them asked me, like, "Oh, do you do art?" And then it would just be like, "Oh, like maybe we could do lessons with my kids," or "Are you still doing that? Oh my gosh, your mural!" Like it was all these questions about painting, and I was just like,
"What?"
I was like, it's not even a whisper anymore at this point. So,
it's clear direction.
Yeah. So I think it's just it's hard to deny your calling. And I think that, looking back and saying, like, that's what gave me purpose at a really dark time was kind of a kick in the butt. Like, it's like now looking back, it's like, okay, so it was given to me there. It's given to me here. It's one of those things that even in a book that I've read before, it's like usually the arts are a gift from the Lord that you're supposed to just like sit with him in and let him act through you and that kind of thing. And I feel like that has happened in multiple ways for me. And I think that, the question, who is Erikka now, like, is the same that I romanticized when I was 18. Like, I'm a painter, like that's what I'm supposed to do. And the thing that makes me feel most fulfilled and, it nourishes my life and my relationships and pretty much every aspect of my life. And I've even tried to ignore it again, but now I have, a partner in my life who's like, Erikka, you're so good at this. He's like, you got to stop ignoring it. And I'm like, oh, so another outside voice is telling me, you know? Yeah. And even some of my coworkers, they're like, you could go back to school. They're like, but you have so much like ability right now that like you don't really need more. Like maybe focus on what you can do now with what you have. And and I think the Lord often uses the people around me to speak directly to me, and he knows that I care about what the people around me think and say, and like that usually sticks in my brain a little easier than, oh, I had this thought the other day, maybe I should do that, So I think that right now it's a painter, and I hope that that stays what it is. And, I have a lot closer relationship with my family now. The Lord, like, he is actively pursuing me, and I'm trying my best to keep pursuing him in the way that he deserves. And, I've been at Orchard Hill for almost 3 years now.
Okay.
And I've met, like, there was an instance where I was like, oh, I feel so alone. I don't know anyone at my church. And now it's like each day that I come, I just like get reminded about all of the people that I actually know just by getting involved in different things and being present and stuff like that. So
showing up and other people show up.
And it's such a big church. It's kind of tough sometimes that, having the instances with the few people that eventually turns into a lot of people that and then you just start to, feel that you found that community that he talks about and that he instructs us to have. And, I think that that's played a good part in my healing process. I was even baptized last year. Yeah. So, and I think there's been a lot of change since then as well, because I think when I first signed up, I was like, had this idea of what I was supposed to do. Like, this will be it, and I'll be cleansed, and I'll be great. And then it was like one of those things that I met with Emily D'Angelo, and she said something to me, and it was just like, it's about holding yourself accountable and having this moment with him. And I was like, oh. I was like, actually, there is a part, like, I'm responsible for this. And, since then, it's like every opportunity that I'm given, I do try to find, like, what I'm actually supposed to have a hand in and what you're not. So I think that there's been a lot of good growth since, since I was that little girl playing in the mud, so.
That was kind of leading into my next question for you. What would you, not necessarily what would you tell your younger self, but what would you tell someone, a middle schooler or a high schooler who is living your middle school, high school life?
I think that what I would tell them is it gets better, first off. I think that there's a lot of things that happen when you're that old that makes it feel like this is it. This is the worst it's ever going to be. But, it might be the worst it's ever going to be. And if you just keep pushing forward and searching for your passions or searching for what you're good at, searching for the Lord when he's looking for you, there's a lot to be found in those things. And there is a lot to be learned from the moments we suffer through. And it usually takes a little while, sometimes a week, sometimes 10 years. But, you eventually get there, and eventually you're thankful for those, horrible or bad things that have happened. And, you learn a lot from it later that, gives you strength in other opportunities. Like, I think that a lot of the pain and sadness and things that I experienced gave me a bigger heart, and I'm able to build strong relationships with other people that I might not have been able to do otherwise. And, if I didn't experience loss and things like that, I might not have grown to appreciate my family the same way that I do. So you never know what the fruit of your struggle is going to be. So you just kind of have to, unfortunately stand through the waves. And, the thing I kind of think about is whenever he has Paul come to walk to him and he starts to get nervous, starts thinking, and then it's like, why would you doubt? But, we're human. We can only do so much, but he always is going to be there to lift us again. We just kind of have to keep our, roots growing in him kind of thing. So,
Fantastic. Well, this has been super helpful, and I'm pretty sure people who've watched it to this point definitely know who you are better than when it started a while ago. So so thanks for being on. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
I feel like I have talked for how long? 45 minutes straight or something? I don't know. 40 minutes. So if anyone made it to the end, hi, thanks.
Is there any public fun place that someone could go to and say, hey, I know who painted that? Is there a mural that's interesting and fun in the Pittsburgh area? Go ahead, tell us.
Pure Athletics in Wexford.
Okay.
There's Vestal Park in McCandless.
Okay.
The Pokeball place by Giant Eagle in Wexford.
Okay, cool.
So,
That's very fun.
My tags are on there. You can find me on Instagram.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming here and just sharing your life and sharing what God has done for you and through you.
Yeah.
And excited to see what the future is going to be.
Yeah. Thanks for having me and letting me talk for so long.
So that was great. If you guys liked what you experienced and saw here today, please like and share this with your friends. Subscribe to our Orchard Hill Plus channel because we got lots of good stuff going on and everything. And when you see the lovely Erikka in the lobby, say hi, introduce yourself. This is how the big church feels small. This is how people can be known better so that we're not just passing each other as strangers here in the community. So again, thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time.